And we're live on YouTube. Okay, we're learning the Gemara. We're towards the top of the page of Kufhei 105, 105.1, or A. So 105A in Perek Chelek, Sanhedrin. So the Gemara says like this. Let's bring up the page. Here we go. We're holding in the middle of the conversation of the Jewish people with the prophets during the times of the exile. So the Gemara continues like this. The pasuk says, it's part of Yirmiyahu. The prophet Jeremiah says, "Madua, hi Rachel, Madua shoyviva ha'am hazeh Yerushalayim mishuva nitzachas." So the pasuk says, why is this people of Jerusalem slid back in perpetual backsliding? So the Jewish people are nitzchis, is like constantly backsliding into seemingly negativity. That's what the prophet is saying. So the Gemara explains that the word mishuva also is from the word teshuva or response. Yeah. So it says, Omer Rav said as follows: Teshuva nitzachas haishiva knesses Yisrael Navi. The prophets, the Jewish people gave the prophets a convincing response. Nitzachas is from the word netzach, means everlasting, but also in the word lenatzech, to be convincing or a winning response. Amalehem navi l'Yisrael. What are we talking about? So the prophets say to the Jewish people, the prophet says, Chizr b'shuva, return with repentance. Aveisechem shechatu, your forefathers who sinned, where are they now? That they sinned seemingly, that the prophet saying, as the Gemara understands now, your forefathers sinned, and where are they now? So what did it benefit them? So return. Amr lahan, so the Jewish people responded to the prophets, so what are you saying? Where my parents are. Obviously, everyone goes with the way of the world, that eventually people pass away. Where are the prophets that admonished our parents? They're also not here. So what are you saying? Shnemer, and how do we find this? It says, it says clearly in Zechariah that your fathers, where are they? And it continues, the pasuk says, and do the prophets live forever? Question mark. So Omer Lehen, so they said back to the Jewish people, but the people, your parents eventually did agree that they were wrong. How do we know this? It says in Zechariah, the prophet Zechariah says, that says that by the words and my commandments, the chukim, that I commanded my servants the prophet, and the pasuk continues, did they not overtake your fathers? And they did, and they repented and said, as the Lord of hosts intended to do to us, according to our ways, according to our doing, so he's dealt with us, meaning to say that they acknowledged that they were wrong. So he's saying, if your parents acknowledge that you're wrong, so you also should acknowledge that you're wrong. The Marsha says, before we get to Rebbe Steinsaltz's commentary, the Marsha and the Gemara says that the answer that the Jewish people gave initially, where were the prophets, is not really a good answer. I mean, although the Gemara says that they gave a tshuva nitzachas, they gave a winning response, but at the end of the day, as he says, that it wasn't just that no one expects to live forever. But the question is how the people died and how the prophets died. It says the prophets died, well, at least most of them died, it's on their beds in a proper death, where your forefathers died in a way of destruction. So basically, it's not just where you are, but how you moved on to the next life. That's what the Marsha explains. It says the Marsha says that the prophets died just like your fathers died. It's the prophets died on their bed in a regular way, like the way most people die. And they were able to be buried. Your forefathers died in horrible ways. Not all of them were able to go in to be buried. And that's why it says, Ein dvari v'chukai shetzivisis avode hanavim halei sigu avesechem. So he says that the forefathers, your forefathers recognized the mistake that they made. Okay, so that's that's what the prophets and the conversation that the prophets had, but it was still an argument the Jewish people made. So here Rabbi Steinsaltz says the Talmud understands that there is an etymologically similarity between the term tshuva, meaning response, and the term meshuva, backsliding, and also nitzhachat, meaning a convincing, is also similar to netzach, eternity, or proprietary. So, as the first question that was asked relates to the eternity of the prophets, and the second question, according to Shmuel, is whether there will be an eternal relationship between God and the Jewish people. So there's an eternal conversation that the Jewish people have. We'll see the continuation of the Gemara. So the Gemara says that the answer really is like this. Shmuel says, Bo asar b'nei adam v'yash lefanav. I don't know if this is a metaphor or actually happened, but it says 10 people sat in front of the prophet. Amr lehem chizr b'shuva. He says, return in repentance. Amr lei, so he said to the prophets, Evet shemach rabbi, v'isha sheger shabayla, klum yesh lezeh al zeh klum. So meaning the way the Gemara initially learns it is that the prophets admonished the Jewish people, and the Jewish people responded, what are you saying? That no one lives forever. So they said it's that your forefathers acknowledged their mistake, whether it is because they didn't come to proper burial, like the Masha says, etc. So here, the Shmuel explains like this, that the prophet said to the Jewish people, return. So they said back to the prophets, Evet shemachre rabbi, a servant who's been sold by his master, or her master. The Isha, shiger shabaylo, or a woman who's divorced by her husband, meaning a sign that there's a disconnect and no longer an interest. The master no longer is interested in his servant, and the husband is no longer interested in his wife. Is klum yesh lezeh klum? Could you still claim ownership? Means you're telling us to return. You sent us away. You sent us to Bavel. You exiled us. You banished us. So now you're saying return? It's talking about the Jewish people in exile. Amr Loi HaKadosh Baruch Hu Lanavi. So God right away tells the prophets, Lech Emerlen, tell the Jewish people, Eize Sefer Krisis Imchem Asher Shilachtiha. You quote, you're describing what happened as a divorce. Do you have a divorce papers, right? You need divorce papers. Do you have divorce papers to show that you're divorced? Do I have creditors that I sold you as my servants were sold? So whether we look at our, the relationship as a married relationship, that's Shlomo Melech, the Shir Shirim, Song of Songs, is constantly referring to the Jewish people and God as a marriage. Like we say, Matan Torah is Zman Matan Torah Seinu, which is coming up now. Matan Torah is the time of our marriage, or engagement and marriage. So the God says to the prophets, tell the Jewish people, where's the document of divorce? Where's the creditors who came and collected you against a debt that I gave you up as my servants? It wasn't that there was divorce papers, I don't want you anymore. It's the sins that cause you to be sold. It's the transgressions was why your mother, so to say, was sent away, meaning the divorce. So it's not that God himself wants to savor relationships with the Jewish people. Shmuel Rashi says, Shmuel Amar, my tshuva nisachas kai gavna asar b'nei adam. What's the answer that they gave was the 10 people sitting. So what the Jewish people said, Evet shemach rabbi, a servant who's been sold by his master, because God sold the Jewish people to Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylonia, who exiled the Jewish people, and he sent us away from him. He could come with any claim to the Jewish people, meaning the Jewish people were saying, what's going on over here? What's your claim over here? And he says, V'hainu da'amar Rish Lakish, and Rish Lakish kind of emphasizes this point of what Shmuel says, that there is no divorce papers. So the reason why the Gemara says there's a solid claim here, that there's a conversation. There's a conversation here, there's a conversation here between the Jewish people and God. The Jewish people saying, you deserted us. You sent us away. You sold us. And God saying, there's no divorce papers. It wasn't There's issues. We're having marital issues, but there's no divorce here. There's a lack of trust. There's sin. There's things that have to be worked out, but there's no clean cut separation, and that's where Rish Lakish adds to that. What does it mean? David Avdi Nebuchadnezzar Avdi. We find that God calls David his servant. Who's David the righteous, the good king, the leader, the first of the house of David, the beginning of the temple, so to say. And then you have Nebuchadnezzar Avdi. Then we find in Yirmiyahu he calls Nebuchadnezzar my servant. How could he call them both my servant? How could you compare that David's a servant and Nebuchadnezzar is a servant? So the reason why God referred to Nebuchadnezzar, again, the destroyer of the temple, the one who exiled the Jewish people to Babylonia and started the whole concept of exile by the Jewish people ever since leaving in mass from Egypt, is Gali v'yadua lefnei mi shamer v'ha'olam. It was known and revealed to he who said, and the world came into being, meaning referring to God. Sha'asidin Yisrael lo yimer kach. He knew the Jewish people would come later and say, you were no longer your servants. You sold you. It's like a master who's given up ownership of his servant, sold his servant. Therefore, God says, hold on. Who rules you? My servant. The law is that a servant that owns something, that servant's acquisition of something belongs to his master. So who does the servant belong to? Who does Nebuchadnezzar belong to? Who does Nebuchadnezzar's acquisitions belong to? All to God. So Nebuchadnezzar is himself my servant. Yes, he may not be a good servant. He may have done things that are not pleasant, but he acted on my behalf in this case. And therefore, if the Jewish people now are, so to say, subservient to Nebuchadnezzar, doesn't change the fact. Nebuchadnezzar Avdi, he's also my servant. So you're by default still the servants of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, of a God. So he says over here, brings down Rashi, says that what's the idea that we call David my servant and Nebuchadnezzar my servant? Two different people, David and Nebuchadnezzar. Shakar la'isa Rasha. How is it that God called this wicked person Nebuchadnezzar, Eved my servant? Shikaru LeDavid, just like he's calling David my servant. The Chsiv b'Sefer Yirmiyahu hinni shalech v'lekachtis Nebuchadnezzar Avdi. Here Yirmiyahu says in chapter 42, I'm sending my servant Nebuchadnezzar. So the Gemara explains, Rish Lakish explains, you can't compare David to Nebuchadnezzar. Because it was known and revealed to he who said, and the world came into being, i.e. a God. The Jewish people will claim that you sold us to Nebuchadnezzar. You no longer have claim on us. Therefore, he calls Nebuchadnezzar my servant to have an answer to say you still belong to God. Like it says, Eved lemi nechasim lemi. Who does the servant belong to? Who does his possessions belong to? Claim Nebuchadnezzar Avdihu. Nebuchadnezzar is my servant. Whatever he acquires belongs to me. You never left my responsibility, my rule. You're still part of my possessions. Okay, these are all conversations where the Jewish people have in the gullus, in the exile. You have to understand the conversations are not just an angry dispute. There's the destruction, and there was a feeling of disconnect, a feeling of what's going on. So we have no longer, the Jewish people were very in turmoil. What does it mean now? How do we remain as Jews? What is our identity now in Gullus? There's no temple, there's no land. Even when the 10 tribes were exiled in the north, and even when the first exile from the better, so to say, the aristocrats from Jerusalem, before that, but Jerusalem was standing and the temple was standing. Maybe not in its glory, but it was standing. But now that there was a total destruction of the Jewish people, destruction of the land, the destruction of the temple, and the Jewish people are exiled. And even whatever was left was under some sort of government rule, etc. And even that didn't last. With the killing of Gedaliah, like we fast the Gedaliah, the Jewish people were confused. What is the relationship between God and the Jewish people? What does this mean? It's not just that the Jewish people were being, so to say, chutzpahdik or being angry at God. It was actually a legitimate conversation. So the pasuk continues, and what comes into your mind shall never come to be. That the Jewish people said, that we will be like the nations, right? The Jewish people are trying to figure out. So what is it? Where do we go from here? So there were some people who said, we're going to be like the regular people. We moved to Bavel, that's it. The land is gone. The temple is gone. Maybe the Torah is gone. The relationship with God is gone. We'll be like everyone else. We'll serve wood and stones. We'll serve the idols. So God says it's not going to be like that. He says in Yecheskel, the next prophet, Chai ani num Hashem, that's an expression of as I live, says the Lord, as an expression of a shvu, of a swearing. Im loy biyad chazaka, whether it's going to have to be even with a hard, was writing into an outstretched arm, ubechema shvucha, and even if it's me with wrath poured out, I'm going to rule over you. The situation that's changed on the ground hasn't changed the relationship, the covenant between the Jewish people, even if it comes down to biyad chazaka. It's a famous answer when the people told Yecheskel, kachol hagoyim beis Yisrael, that we're going to be like all the rest of the people. There's no difference now. The Jewish people are like everyone else. So God responded, no. Even if with a hard hand, be what may be, this relationship is not over. We're going through hard times. You moved out. You're not living at home right now. There's no divorce. Amar Rav Nachman said on this pasuk of Yecheskel, so he kind of turned it on God. That God says to the Jewish people, Im loy biyad chazak, if I'm going to have to do it with the hard hand, but we're not. So Amar Rav Nachman said, Kol ki hai rischa lirtach rachmana alan v'lifroi kinan. He says, okay, let it be. Say, let the merciful one come with wrathful at us, all that wrath, and redeem us. You said you're going to come with wrath at us, so bring the wrath and redeem us already. What does it mean then come? Come take us home. You're angry that we're saying that we're no longer, we have a relationship, and he said, no, I'm going to come with all this anger, with this hard hand, so come with your hard hand. Redeem us, take us out of this galus, of this exile. So he says, Rashi says that the prophet was told by God, Yecheskel, and he told the Jewish people, whatever you're thinking is not going to happen. There's not going to be this idea of Hijrat. There's not going to be this idea of Kachol going Beis Yisrael. You're still mine. Kikol hai rizcha, so what does Reb Nachman say? Mi yitin v'yav zakas. Let this anger come. V'chem shvucha, with this pouring wrath. Yes, so even if we don't want to be redeemed, force us out and redeem us. But at least come redeem us. We're not going to, we don't want to, bring it on. Bring on your commitment to us. Even if it comes with anger, that's not pashut. It's not simple what Reb Nachman is saying. So, he says that and Yaakov says this is a continuation. The conversation is a continuation. That the Jewish people said that we're like an Eved Kanani, we're like a servant to a Gentile. So halachically, there's questions, and it's not, the halach is not like that. A person may think, the Torah says, a person may think that if I'm sold as an Eved Kanani, if I'm sold to a Gentile, to a idol worshipping owner, maybe just like my owner does idols, I also have to serve idols. So the Torah says, no, you're not an Eved Kanani. You're an Eved Yisrael, that yes, you're sold into exile, but you don't lose your laws. As the halach is, a Jewish Eved can't come and say, I'm going to be like my master and serve idols. So the pasuk the Gemara continues that now Yeshayahu, the next prophet he brings. It says, V'yisroi lemishpat eleikov yorenu. What does this mean? That it says to V'yisroi lemishpat, and chastite in the judgment, his God will instruct him. What does this mean? Omer Rabba Bar Chana, the Rabba, the son of Chana, said like this. Son of Bar Chana, sorry. Bar Chana said, sorry, not Chana. Omer Navi Yisrael. This is also a conversation. The prophet says, the Yeshayahu says to the Jewish people, Shaya Navi, Chizru b'shruva, repent. Return to God with repentance, with return. The Jewish people said we can't. We feel totally subservient to our evil inclination. Castrate, get rid of your Yetzer Hara. Let God, his God will instruct him. Like he says, in other words, God should instruct the evil inclination to allow us to overcome him. And we are incapable of doing so on our own. So Reb Steinzas learns that the Jewish people said, if you want us to get rid of our evil inclination, let God get rid of the evil inclination. Let him tell the evil inclination to stop tormenting us, and to stop tempting us, and to stop putting us in situations where we feel overwhelmed by the evil inclination, by the desires that we have. So he says, here we go. So he says, the Rashi says, Omer Rab Ava Bar Kahana. Rab Abba Bar Kahana. Rab Abba Bar Kahana is I'm not sure why he says Omer Rabba. We must have a different girsa, because we have Omer Rabba Bar Chana, and he has Omer Rab Abba Bar Kana. So I'm not sure if it's the same. It maybe has a different girsa, but either way, Hainu Tshuva Nitzaches, unless the Rashi is out of place. This is the victory, the sort of say the strong answer the Jewish people said that we can't. At the end of the day, it means we're discussing here. Finally, really, if you look at the Gemara is getting to the core of the problem, right? We're giving excuses. We've been sold to we're like servants. We feel like we're gonna have it Kanani. God divorced us. That's all excuses. Finally, the Navi says just do tshuva, and the Jewish people finally come to. If you put it all into a single conversation, the Jewish people finally come and say we can't. I mean, they're being honest. I mean, it's not, forget with all the excuses that we've been sold. We can't. We have our Yetzer Hara. Yetzer Hara is stronger than us. So that's taka true question. That's taka a tshuva nitzachas, a victorious answer, because they say, "What do you want from us? Get rid of the Yetzer Hara, and we won't have a problem." That's how Rashi understands it. And this finishes off this Gemara that is talking about the kings and the times of the exile. We may get back to it, but this is kind of how the Gemara finishes the first part of the mission, when the Gemara discusses the different peoples that don't have a portion in the world to come, and what that led to. All those people, their influence, what it led to over time. So I just want to bring down the Rashi learns in this conversation between the Jewish people and the prophet, obviously through God, about that the prophet says do tshuva, and the Jewish people said we have the Yetzer Hara, and he says get rid of it. He says you tell God to get rid of the Yetzer Hara. So that's what Rashi says. But the Ad Ramah, which is another commentary we've learned many times, that says that the Jewish people told the Navi that if that he said like this: so he says basically the Jewish people were saying, what do you want from us? You want us to get rid of the Yetzer Hara? You want us to get like you put in the Yetzer Hara, you give us all these temptations. So if you want us to go straight, then everything be straight. You want us to we'll do good if we don't have temptations, basically. And basically, they're kind of blaming God. And what the prophet answers is really that no one's just because you have the Yetzer Hara, yes, that makes it difficult, and that's why you were given the Torah, and that's why we're learning, getting ready for Shavuos now. When the angel said, give the Torah to heaven, Moshe answers, Yetzer Hara yesh b'nechem, you don't have an evil inclination. The Torah, part of being in this world, and part of receiving the Torah, and part of what you're doing here is to deal with your Yetzer Hara. So to say that you're blaming God, that's nice, but at the end of the day that's part of your challenge. Don't force you to listen to him. You can't say God forced you, that he gave you Yetzer Hara and that forced you. He gave you temptation. You acted on the temptation, but doesn't mean you can't come back and throw it in God and say that he should get rid of our temptation, get rid of the struggles we have. That's what we're doing here. If you don't want struggles, that's the angels' world. That's not this world. Okay, so that we finished this first part of the Gemara where we talked about the three kings. We spoke about Menashe, king of Israel, and we spoke about Yerovam ben Nevat, and we spoke about Achav. Okay, now we're going to go to the four commoners, meaning commoners, non-kings, that also don't have a portion in the world to come. We're going to have Bilam, which was the prophet that we deal with in a few months, that tries to curse the Jewish people when they enter the land. We have Doeg. Doeg is the advisor, enforcer of King Saul. We have Achitophel, which is a very complicated personality. They're all complicated, but Doeg is complicated as well. Doeg was just, he may be the image they give him as an enforcer and a horrible person. The Torah we learned before that Doeg was a Talmud Chacham. He knew how to learn. He was a boastful person. He was an egotistic person. He was a Rasha, but he wasn't just a nobody. Achitophel was even more complicated. He was David's advisor. David's trusted advisor, who was his greatest enemy. He was always scheming to overthrow David. He had this vision of him being king. We learned about that, right? He had this vision of him being king. He didn't realize it wasn't him. It was his grandson Salman, because of Shlomo Melech, because Achitophel is the father of Bathsheba, which is one of David's wives, the mother of King Solomon. So Achitophel again is very complicated, and Gehazi also very difficult personality. He is the attendant to Elisha the prophet. Also, the whole story that we learned about the Tsaras, that he gets the leprosy because he goes out and he engages Naaman, the general. We learned about that, the general from the Syria. So he's also one of those who don't have a portion of the world to come. It's not just that he got leprosy; he ends up becoming a person that he enhanced the issues with the idol worship. He put in the name of God, etc., etc. Okay, let's start. Let's go through the Gemara. We're going to go through the different characters. Today we're going to start with Bilam. That's as far as we're going to get within Bilam himself. All right. The Gemara says, who's Bilam? Again, Bilam is the prophet of the nations. There's a famous Rashi. Rashi teaches us that when it says that there was never a prophet by the Jewish people like Moses, it says by the Jewish people, but in the world there was. It says in certain levels, Bilam's prophecy was greater than the prophecy of Moses. Not as a person, but whatever that means, however you define a greater prophet than Bilam, but the Rashi clearly quotes. It's obviously the idea brought down by the rabbis that in their certain levels, Bilam was a greater prophet than Moshe. Okay, so who's Bilam? So it says Bilayam. The Gemara, like we learned before, when we started to analyze Achav, and Yeravam, all the names we try to figure out Benavat, we try to analyze their names to understand their character and to understand their shortcomings. So the Gemara right away says that we could find it in their names. So the name Bilham is from the word Beloyam. He has no people. Or also Beloyam, he has no Olam Haba, he has no portion of the world to come. Bilam also means Shebilaam, that he tried to bring down or swallow up a people. Ben Baor, that's his father's name, or seemingly we'll see what that means, but seemingly he's Bilam, the son of Baor. What's Baor? Shaba al Be'ir. Be'ir also means cattle, like the Be'irim. So Be'ir means he engaged in bestiality, he had relations with his donkey. So he lived with his donkey. This is who Bilam is. Now, in the name Bilam, when first see Rashi, Beloya means She'en lechelik imam. He has no portion in the world to come like the rest of the people. Other people say he had no people. He didn't live amongst his people. Other commentaries say that also he advised to swallow up. It says Shiatumim koimim mi'amai. He didn't live amongst his own kind. It means although he lived over there by where he lived, where they came to ask him to curse the Jewish people, that wasn't his people. Shebala am shebilbul Yisrael ba'atzasai shehisiu levalek kedamrinam lemeimar lekaman v'hipol mehem chavta al alafim. He also tried to swallow up the people because it was through his advice, we learn later, that Balak, that the daughters of Midian went out to entice the Jewish people, and from that came the plague that 24,000 Jews died. So at the end of the day, the story goes, as the story does go, that though he doesn't curse the Jewish people, but he advises his Balak to send the daughters of Midian out, and that brings down 24,000 Jews. Ba'ar, what does it mean, Ba'ar? Shaba al Be'ir, that he came on his cattle. Shaba al Sinai, Kamoi behema b'targim minan ba'ir. We know that one of the words ubi'irim. We find that also in the tribes of Gad and Ruvain say that they want to stay on the east side of the river, it says Ubeirenu. So that's one of the words used for cattle. So Ben Ba'ar means he came on, he slept with his donkey. All right. And we're gonna learn about it that comes up in the conversation really that Bilam has with the donkey. All right, so it says, some explain that Bilam left his homeland, Aram Naharayim. I took down the maps. Aram Naharayim, we find Aram Naharayim is kind of in biblical times. I think they say over here that Aram Naharayim is northeast of Eretz Yisrael. It says, Hushmaya Tanachi shel Ezra shemekul b'derech klal im tzafin Surya al gviyad gvul Turkey. So Aram Naharayim is where he comes from is next to Iskandrun over there, which is where the border of Turkey and the port of Iskandrun is on top of Syria. So around over there is where Aram Naharayim would be, and remained a person without a country. That's the Aruch says, so Bilaam. Okay, so now we're going to do, so the Gemara first to be seeing his name a little bit of already his character. The Gemara continues. Tana, now we're talking about Ba'ar. This is a hard Gemara. Again, to put it into practical understanding. Tana hu Ba'ar. Ba'ar means his father was Ben Ba'ar, right? So we said that also we just learned before Ben Ba'ar means he engaged in bestiality. Now the Gemara says hu Ba'ar, hu Kushan Rishasayim, hu Lavan Harami. So this goes to show you that who is Ba'ar, his father? He's first Kushan Rishasayim. Who's Kushan Rishasayim? Kushan Rishasayim is the head of is an army of Aram Naharayim, that same north of Syria, of Aram Naharayim. He's the king Kushan Rishasayim. We learned about him in the beginning of Judges, who comes and torments the Jewish people for a long time until what was his name? Until Kenaz, I forget the judge, comes back and redeems the Jewish people from Kushan Rishasayim. He's also Lavan. Who's Lavan? Lavan is the father of Rachel and Leah, right? The grandfather of the Jewish people, right? Doesn't Lavan say when Yaakov comes and takes his family home to his father? He says, "Abanai, banai, benaisai, your children are my children, your daughters are my daughters." Well, who's this Ba'ar? The Ba'ar says he's also Kushan Rishasayim. He's also the same king who tormented the Jews, seemingly his own grandchildren. Ba'ar, so and then also it says Ba'ar, Sheba Be'ir. Also, what does it mean Ba'ar? Why was he called Ba'ar? Also, he engaged in bestiality. A lot of the commentaries challenge that, because if you want to say that Bilaam himself engaged in bestiality, that we have a source, we have a conversation between him and his donkey. But where does it say that Lavan had anything to do with his animals? But some of the commentaries challenge this idea. Kushan Rishasayim. Why is he called Kushan Rishasayim? The word Rishasayim is also in the root word of Rasha, of an evil person. Rishasayim would indicate he was a Rasha, an evil person twice. It's plural. The Avid Shtei Rishiyos B'Yisrael, he 2 times did bad to the Jewish people. Achas b'mei Yaakov, once in the day of Yaakov, when he wanted to kill Yaakov when he pursued him. Achas b'mei Shavai Tashayftim, in the times of the judges. Again, some commentaries on the Chumash, the Radak, others try to understand the Malbim, who want to say that it's more of a Gilgul, of a reincarnation of Lavan. Others say that Ba'ar is the son of Lavan, and therefore Bilam is the grandson. The Gemara definitely takes on that Bilam is mishpacha. Our biggest enemies come from within. That he's family. Bilam is a cousin. He's a relative of the Jewish people. Umashemay, and who is he really? Lavan Harami. That's who he is. Again, so just small things. Yes, Shuki. You're on mute.
Hey there. I'm just trying to remember other geographically relevant points. Like, isn't that not far where Avram Avinu was from? Also in that northeastern part of Turkey?
Yeah, Aram Naharayim, it's northeastern Syria. So Aram Naharayim is what we call Macedonia. That's at some point Avram and his family moved there. I mean, Avram is like everyone else, was originally from Bavel, but he moved out from Bavel to Aram Naharayim, and then eventually Terach. Avram continued on to Eretz Yisrael, to Eretz Canaan at the time. Again,
but geographically, we're talking a few days distance, maybe not. which in those days
Yeah,
is
yeah. I
pretty
mean,
close.
even if you're by Iskandar, even if you're by Syria, yeah, it's not so far. No, it's
Right.
not. It's not so far.
And then the other part that stuck out to me here is just because I study a lot of Ein Yaakov over the years, this theme of who X, who Y, who Z, where it says he is this, he is this, he is that. It's usually like referring to different iterations of like the same evil or entity or experience that they're trying to convey. And so it's like a grammatical effect that they do here where they use the word who three times referring to the same person, but kind of showing like echoes of that type of person versus
So,
like an individual themselves. That
so
happens very
that's
often in Yaakov.
yeah. So that again, so that's what it would seem. Some of the commentaries on the Chumash itself, when they talk about the Kushan Rishasayim, I looked at other places in the Navi when it says about him, but the commentaries over here seem to like Rashi clearly is going to say it's the same person. The question is, some people like to learn, like the Eitz Yosef learns that Bilam was Rishon, Kushan Rishasayim. According to that, what I don't understand, that it says, V'hachi isa Medrash Tanchuma. The Medrash Tanchuma says Bilam ze Lavan. Bilam himself was Lavan, not Baor is Lavan. So the Gemara learns that his father was Lavan. Because then it would make sense, Baor meaning bestiality. V'hevi shebal zekukin dinar kasif shebilam hoya gilgul shalavan. He says that the Eitz Yosef says, like you saying, it's more of a gilgul kind of thing, or reincarnation. But there's also opinions that say that Bilam himself is Kushan Rishasayim. The problem with Kushan Rishasayim being Bilam, just technically, if you're saying it's the same exact person, is the Torah clearly says in Matas and Maseh, when they deal with Lavan, with Bilam, it says they killed him. It says the Gam Bilam was killed on a sword. And as we're going to learn later, like he says, if he dies, Ma'is Yisharim. So it's like, it seems just literally, it means if you're going to say he's Lavan, okay, so Lavan outlived his son, and then he was king of he was Rishon, he was Kushan Rishasayim, whatever. He lived that long. He outlived his daughters and his son-in-laws and all that, and he lived through the exile. Again, it's definitely complicated just to put it into context. That seems like from Rashi, it seems like Rashi takes, we'll see in a second, takes it a little bit more literal. It says Tana hu ba'ar aviv shel bilam hu kishan rishasayim hu lavan arami. And it says, Achas v'mei Yaakov shiradav achrav v'bikish lakar. Risha Sayim is that he twice tried to destroy the people when it came. And what I'm saying is, it's like, even if you want to say it's a reincarnation, the very fact that you're calling him Risha Sayim, that means you're connecting the two evils, the evil that Lavan wanted to do with the evil that Kushan did in the time of the judges. At the end of the day, it puts it as a single, the fact that he has a single name, kind of, it's not just a single idea, like saying, people want to say, Hitler was Haman, and Haman is Amalek. It's like, but you have to put it all together. If you're mixing, you have to mix it together. So you have to mix also love and claiming ownership of the Jewish people, right? What does he tell Yaakov? Banai, 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 banai. Your children are my children, your daughters are my daughters. So what does that mean to say? That means to say is that Lavan is that Lavan is a very complex person. That's what a Rami is. What's a Rami? A Rami means he's a trickster. What's he a trickster? Everything he says is manipulated. He says that these are my grandkids. They're grandkids. What are you tormenting them in the time of the judges? What's the story? What's this? There's no consistency in your claims. Which one is it? Are you a grandfather or are you a tormentor? But that's the whole thing of being a Rami. A Rami means he constantly is misguiding his intentions and showing different masks and different approaches to get his agenda. And when does he come back? After the death of Yehoshua, is where it says Vayichaf Hashem b'Yisrael v'yitim bi'at Kushan Rishasayim. Kushan Rishasayim comes from Aram Naraim. Now a little bit, contrary to your point, Shuki, is that actually, like in the case of Kushan Rishasayim, he actually comes from where Lavan would have lived. So Lavan did live in Aram Naraim, and Kushan Rishasayim is from Aram Naharaim, which is the same area north Syria on the Turkish border, if that's where it is. I mean, I'm just going with what Wikipedia says, but it makes sense coming from
I
that
think
area.
I think, Rabbi, that connects very well to what I was saying, because in the story, Yaakov didn't spend months and months on the road from home to Lavan. And that's my point, is that it's in
Yeah,
that
yeah.
same, they lived right near each other. So clearly this is someone who could be Lavan, or at least a very close descendant to them.
Yeah, yeah. It definitely seems that he's definitely, like I said, others say he's a grandson. Like it definitely seems like he was Some people say, like, I don't know if you remember, everyone remembers in the Chumash, it says that there's a Rashi there that says that it seems like that Yaakov took credit not just for the success in Lavan's business, but even the success in his family. Rashi says that Lavan didn't even have sons when Yaakov showed up, and the proof is that Rashi says, why would he have sent his daughters as shepherds if he had sons? Although one could ask, Rivka also was with the cattle, and she definitely had a brother. Lavan was alive. The Torah tells us he was alive. Obviously, Lavan is that kind of person, takes no responsibility. We couldn't expect him even to be a shepherd. But in the case of Rachel, the Gemara says, the Rashi brings down that he wouldn't have sent Rachel and Leah out to be the shepherds had he had sons. So when Yaakov says that I blessed you, that even the sons he had were a blessing from Yaakov, and we learn about their sons when he pursues Yaakov, and it could be that son was the father of. I mean, some people like to believe that there's Lavan, the son, and there's Bilaam. Bilaam would be a grandson to Lavan, or a great grandson. Okay, you're right. It's all within the same relationship and locations. So it says like this. Chsiv in some verses which says. Thank you for your insight, Shuki. So some verses it says Ben Ba'ar, and then it says Benoi Ba'ar, his son Ba'ar. So is it the son of Ba'ar, or is Ba'ar the son of Bilaam? So Rabbi Yochanan explains that it's not a contradiction in the verses. Aviv Benoihu Loi Benevios. He's his father, but we know that again Lavan was a prophet. How do we know Lavan was a prophet? The Torah tells us. The Torah tells us that he has a dream or in a vision, and God comes to him in the vision and tells him, "Don't hurt Yaakov." And he tells Yaakov, "I had a vision. Your father came, and not for your God coming to you at night. I could have really hurt you, but I'm going to back off." And God tells him to back off. So clearly, Lavan was himself a prophet, but he's still like a son in prophecy to the prophet that Bilaam was. Bilaam was a stronger prophet. Benoi Ba'or Mashma Ba'or Benoi Shel Bilaam Haya. Seemingly, there's a second verse that supports the idea that Ba'or was the son of Bilaam. So it says, "B'noihu leBilam b'nevius sheBilam gadol mi aviv hayu b'nevius." That Bilam was much greater, superior to his father in prophecy. Okay. Again, the commentaries seem to be challenged a bit with this whole setup over here, but let's go further. The Gemara continues. Bilam hu delay asi la'omidasi. What is Bilam? So this says Bilam. The Gemara says now the Gemara is challenging the whole Mishnah. The Mishnah says that Bilam is one of those who doesn't have a portion of the world to come. This is one of the Gemaras that went through, seemingly according to the commentaries, went through sensory. Again, the sensory was in the different times. I'm not sure when. There's certain sensories that were initially under in early times under the Romans, that the Talmud went through sensory, and then there's sensory that happened even later years when they opened up the printing presses in Eastern Europe, in Vilna, etc. When they had later all the issues, they were claiming that the Jewish people, that the publications were anti-Christian, etc. So they went through second century over there. So I believe so. So here, this is one of the Gemaras that deals with sensory. So it says like this: Bilam hud lo yasu la'omidasi. Bilam doesn't come to the world to come. Ha'achrini asu masnisimani. So it says what he's trying to say, that other Gentiles do have a portion in the world to come. Who's that opinion? So this comes into the very complicated question, and Gemara really in Avodah Zarah talks about it, about do the Gentiles also have a portion in the world to come? So Gemara says the very fact that you're saying Bilam is clearly a Gentile. He's not a Jew, right? Even if he's related and he's a cousin, uncle, whoever he is, Bilam is definitely not a Jewish person. So he's not part of the descendants of Yaakov. He's not a descendant of Avram, for that matter. Lavan was not a descendant of Avram. He's a relative. So you're trying to say that Bilam, like, he's an evil person, he's a bad person, he doesn't have a portion in the world to come, but others do. So Rashi says it clearly, and Rabbi Steinsaltz puts it in clearly. Like, I think it went through sensory over here. It says, Hashar Nachrim Asu, other Gentiles do have a portion in the world to come. Tana, the fact that our Mishnah counts the Masnisin, the Bilam Shay Nachri, Behedya, that they count Bilam as part of the commoners. The other commoners are Jews. Gechazi, Chitofel, and Doeg. Doeg Hadomi, even though he says if he's from Edom, but he's a Jew. Either he went through conversion, or he was his forefathers were. From here, clearly from our Mishnah, it supports the idea that Gentiles have a portion in the world to come. So the Gemara says, Masni Simani, who is our Mishnah go according to? So Rashi again skips a little bit ahead, but it says, Amalei, Rabbi Shua, Elu Nemar, the Rabbi Shua says, Yashfu Rishayim L'Sha'ila B'chol HaGoyim, Mashma. Okay, let's get back to this Rashi, because this Rashi is really connected to the Gemara afterwards. So the Gemara answers, Rabbi Yeshua, it's Rabbi Yeshua. The Tanya, we learned like this in a Brisa. It says, Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shua, of course, the colleagues, the teachers of Rabbi Akiva. So they said, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Elazar says, Yashuvu Rishayim L'Sha'ila, the wicked will go back L'Sha'ila to the abyss. Kol Goyim Shech Chelikim, all the nations, Shech Chelikim, who forget God. Now the question is how we understand this verse. Is this verse referring to Kol Goyim Shech Chelikim in all nations? Anyone who's a Gentile who doesn't know God by definition, that's what the pasuk is trying to say. Therefore, also is going to go into the abyss. So the Gemara, so Rebbe Lezer says, Yashuv Rishayim L'Sha'ila. What does it mean that the wicked will go to the abyss? Elu Paishe Yisrael. These are the sinners of the Jewish people. Kol Goyim Shech Chelikim. Elu Paishe Goyim. These are the sinners amongst the nations. The problem is that seemingly Rebbe Lezer is also just saying the sinners amongst the nations. So according to some opinions, the word Paishe is an addition, was put in for the sensory. So not to make it that all the Gentiles go to the abyss, but just the sinners. But some people say that some people took that word paisha out, and it's only elu goyim, because that's basically what we're trying to say. That Rabbi Elazar holds that the Gentiles do not have a portion in the world to come. Div Rabbi Elazar, that's the opinion of Rabbi Elazar. Amalei Rabbi Shua responds to Rabbi Elazar, v'chinemar b'chol goyim, aloi lo nemer ela kol goyim shei chelikim. It doesn't say all the Gentiles. It says the Gentiles that forget God. El yashuv rishayim l'shayla ma'ininu kol goyim shei chelikim. So Rabbi Shua seemingly is saying two things. The Gemara doesn't say clearly, but Rabbi Shua is saying it's two things. Rabbi Elazar says that the pasuk is saying, if you took out the sensory, Rabbi Elazar says the pasuk is saying that the wicked of the Jewish people are going to go into the abyss like the Gentiles who have no portion in the world to come. But Rabbi Shua says it doesn't say all the Gentiles. So therefore, Rabbi Shua takes out two things. One thing is he says it's not talking about the sinners of the Jewish people at all, which is a huge thing. Meaning Rabbi Shua is taking out the idea that Paisha Yisrael go into Sha'ila, go into the abyss. And he says, what does it mean? Kol goyim sheich elikim el yeshuv rishayim l'shayla. It's one single verse. Now, what does it mean? The wicked go in to the abyss. Who is it referring to? To those Gentiles who don't know God, which are wicked. But the other Gentiles that do know God, they're not going to be part of those who don't have a portion in the world to come. And we have clear verses in the prophets that support that there's going to be nations in the time of the world to come, like we're going to see now, going back to the Rashi on top. The Rashi says, Masni Simani, Omle Rabbi Shua, Ilu Nemri Yeshuv Rishayim L'Shayla. Had the verse said that the wicked return to the abyss, meaning they don't have a portion to the world to come. B'chol hagoyim mashma k'dekamarta, then it would be like you said, hash d'chsiv kol goyim sheich yelkim, just those of the nations that forget God. It only means those specific goyim of the nations, the Gentiles that forget God, like Bilaam, ushikumaisa, it says in the parentheses, and the people that are like Bilaam. Bilaam has a crew; he's not just running on his own. Avalachrini, others, asu, they're going to have a portion of the world to come. Kidamrin and Breish Pirkin, like we say it clearly in the beginning of Chelek. Clearly we say that in the times of Mashiach, the shepherds and those who are going to be part of the story of the world to come are going to be the nations. The shepherds are going to be, while the Jewish people are learning Torah, the avoda of the nations is going to be engaging in the work of the world. I just want to say, he quotes the Yad Ramah is one of those who takes out the word paishe. Again, always depends where you lived, the Yad Ramah was actually, I think, in Spain. The Rambam is much more stronger language. He lived in the protection of, he didn't live in a Christian country. At the end, he moved to Egypt and Eretz Yisrael. He didn't live in, he was a little more free with his pen. So he says, "Appears kol goyim sheich elikim hanu kol hagoyim sheim medu b'rishayim ha'kvar nemer lo yeshuv b'rishayim l'shayla." Okay, so according to, and he says over here, "V'nir shamila paisha hi ha'isafa shalat senzer." The Yad Ramah seems, or the Gemara here, who's quoting the Yad Ramah, seems to feel that the sensory added the word Paishe, so even according to Rabbi Lazar, it shouldn't seem like all the nations don't have a portion or go to the abyss. Okay, but either way, however you're going to look at it, Rabbi Lazar seems to hold that the Goyim, the Gentiles, don't have a portion in the world to come. Rabbi Shua holds they do have a portion in the world to come. And Rashi brings support to that idea based on the Gemara in Chelek on page 91 that says the nations of the world will be there in the time of the world to come. Again, this is a short topic here in our Gemara, a very long topic in the beginning of Avodah Zarah. What goes into that question. And he says, and the Gemara continues. Umaynin, who Rashi says, Kol Goyim Sheichel Kim, the Mishum Hachi Bar Kadosh Baruch Hu Rashayim, Shebehem V'Noisen Oisen Begehenim Ve'en Lo Chelek La'asid Aval Shah Yesh Dem Chelek. And therefore, according to Rabbi Shua, the fact that the pasuk is splitting itself between the sinners and those who don't have a portion in the world to come, because only the sinners don't have a portion in the world to come, but those who are not sinners do have a portion in the world to come. The regular Chasidi Umasailim, the regular kind Gentiles, do have a portion in the world to come. Again, this conversation comes up many, many times. It comes up in the conversation between Antoninus and Rebbe. Antoninus was the friend of Rebbe, who was evidently some sort of emperor in the time of Rome. We're not clear exactly what Antoninus was, but he definitely was either a Caesar or a governor in the time of Rome, who was a very close companion to Rebbe, Rabbeinu Kadosh, and he has that conversation about does he have a portion in the world to come? Yes, Shuki.
Yeah, another small question here, just about connecting this maybe to earlier on in the first few pages of Sanhedrin that we studied, where we kind of went a little deep into the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. And I'm wondering why that's not quoted here at all. Why don't they just use that as an example of a path people are given to live that rewards them in the next life? And so I'm curious, like that seems like very strong evidence. I'm curious why it's not brought in to this conversation.
I mean, as a devil's advocate, why would the 7 Noach laws be evidence of a portion of the world to come?
What purpose would there be to teach people to follow it if there's no reward for it? Just do it because you have to, no choice. Then that's not free will, and humans have free will. I mean, we dove into this a bit, I mean, maybe it was like 3 or 4 years ago when we first started Sanhedrin, but I remember us talking about the concept that the very nature of teaching it to them and teaching it to people who aren't beholden to the laws we have, that otherwise society would break down, but like there's a reward for that this is the better way to do it. Better means that there's an opposite. And that, if there's no difference between one or the other, what motivation would they have other than, historical stories of something awe-stricken, of a group of people?
Again, a good question. I have to remember if specifically the Gemara mentions of the world to come, but it seems the Gemara over here is a little. I'm going to say it's a little. I'm not going to use the word out of place because it has to address the question. Because obviously, why are you putting Bilaam together with Doeg, Achitophel, and Gehazi? As evil as they were, he's a Gentile, they're a Jew, and we're talking about the portion world to come. So obviously, they're asking that question. Again, the Gemara of Avodah Zarah goes into this at length about trying to figure out about the world to come. I'm almost sure that there's a conversation between Rebbe and Rabbeinu Kadosh and Antoninus about the world to come, if he had to convert or not. Like he wanted. Some opinions is that he did convert, but I think that he had that conversation with Rebbe if he has to convert in order to get a portion of the world to come. But and it seems like the conventional understanding is based on the idea of the beginning of Chelek, and it says V'ro Goyim. It's a clear pasuk that's going to be the nations are going to live, and then obviously if you get deeper into it, it could be based on the argument of the Maimonides and the Nachmanides of the different stages of the world to come, because there are different stages in the world to come. So the question would be how many, how far in the different stages of the world to come do the Gentiles have? Because you could say that the verse that talks about the watching of the sheep by the nations while the Jewish people learn Torah, it could be talking about the early stage, but not in the later stage. There's different opinions. For instance, the idea of Chad Charov, of which we learned about before. I didn't know this, but I saw this in the talk of the Rebbe. The idea that there's an argument we learned before, if there's going to be 2,000 years or 1,000 years of, so to say, destruction if that's talking about one stage or two stages in the time of the world to come. So there's definitely stages in the world to come, and there's arguments about how those stages are going to be, if there's going to be bodies or just souls, etc., etc. Chassidus takes on the opinion of Nachmanides, Ramban, with the nun n at the end, that says it's all going to be souls and bodies, not like Maimonides in the beginning of Chelek. In this Perek that says it's going to be Olam HaNeshama, it's the world of, there's Olam Haba and there's Yemais HaMashiach, the days of Mashiach, and Olam Haba, not the same thing. And here we're talking about Olam Haba, the world to come. But about your question about reward for the 7 mitzvahs, that's not so simple, because there is the concept basically that's brought down in the halacha, that why are certain of the 7 mitzvahs that are not punishable by death by Jews are punishable by death by Gentiles, is because the idea of the 7 mitzvahs is the Shevis Yitzhara, to have the world, like you said, Shuki, that the world has to run. So you're saying if they're part of keeping world management, why don't they get rewarded for that? One could argue, well, you're in the world, and that, part of world management is to stay in the world. I mean, maybe the reward is to be able to live in this world. Again, it seems like definitely it could be the argument between Rabbi Shua and Rabbi Lazar is not so much about if there's going to be Gentiles after the time of Mashiach, but how far into the time of Mashiach will there be Gentiles? Will it just be in the Emoisa Mashiach, or will it extend itself into Olam Haba, into the world to come? And that's a question about what is Olam Haba, and how is that different from the days of Mashiach? But excellent point, Shuki. All right, let's continue just a little further. It says, even Bilaam himself, in his prophecies or what have you, also supported the idea that he may not have a portion in the world to come, because he says, Tamais nafshi mais yisharim, let me die the death of the righteous, or Yisharim is the straight. And then im Thomas nafshi mais yisharim, basically saying is, if I die a regular death, again, he did not die a regular death, he was killed by Pinchas, and Pinchas went out, is to heyachrise kamayu, then I'll be like the Jewish people, means I'll have a portion of the world to come. V'im lav, hinini hoylech la'ami, I'm going to go to my people, which he said before. Ami means to say that he doesn't have a world to come. So Rashi says, Va'af oisei Rasha, even this wicked person, meaning Bilaam, nasan simen ba'atzmei she'en lechelik lasid, that he gave himself a sign, meaning he wasn't sure himself. Is his evil ways wrong or not? So he said he gave himself a test that im Thomas nafshi ma'is yisharim. He said, I don't have a portion of the world to come. Why? Because he said, Thomas nafshi ma'is yisharim im yomas misa atzmai. Because if I die a regular death, the death of a righteous person, so then I'm with him in the world to come. It means he's not sure that this is, again, all these different little ideas that we find in these Gemaras about these people seems to say that about the complexity of these people, because they're not. He's not, you have evil people who are just, I don't believe in God, I don't care, I don't do, I want to be destroyed. The fact is that he himself is not sure. He says, if I die a death of regular, that means I have the portion of the world to come, thinking to himself that what he's doing is right. And maybe this is his God's will, and he argues it out with God. We're going to learn next week, 2 weeks out. Next week is Shavuos. We're going to learn he has the chutzpah klapi malya. He has a chutzpah to God. V'im lav de lo yomas ali yahareg. If I get killed, I don't die a regular death. I go to my people in Gehenna. Again, the Gemara doesn't jump on the words of Ami over here. Why does it say, let's see if Rabbi Steinsaltz says, in other words, my faith will be that of the rest of the wicked people. Ami, so here, Rabbi Steinsaltz just cleans it up a bit. That Ami doesn't mean my people, but means my type of people, meaning the wicked. Okay, let's stop over here, everyone. Shkoach for joining, everyone, and thank you for the insight, Shuki. And we're going to continue next week. Bilaam has a little bit of more time with us in the Gemara, and then we're going to obviously move on to the other characters of people that don't have a portion to the world to come. Laila Tov, everyone. Have a beautiful Shabbos and Chodesh Tov.